I'm Steve.
So, Steve, why don't you take over about, you know, what was it we were gonna talk about?
So today we're going to
Oh,
talk
your best hair transplant results.
your best hair
Yes.
transplant.
So Steve's got an imaginary map that he's made of from all these consultations that he's done of what your best hair transplant results could be. So feel free to ask us all the questions that you want here in the live chat. We'll try and answer as many of those as we possibly can. If we're going to do 30 minutes, and then however many we can in 30 minutes. And then Steve, why don't you take off? What is their best hair transplant results based on the Norwood they currently are?
Right. So, yeah, I've always wanted to do this, and I'm actually going to put this together in an actual like diagram or PowerPoint or whatever at some point, and we'll put it on videos. But it's really about expectations, and you guys always hear us talk about that and know about that. But if you think about it, if you think about the fact that in YouTube, and just using YouTube as an example, it could be any type of medium nowadays. You're going to look and see doctors that are going to put out what they consider like really good results. I mean, obviously, this is a lot about promotion and sales and marketing and that kind of thing. And it's just like anything, like doctors that do breast augmentation down in South Beach going to put beautiful women on there. I mean, that's just going to drive business because it's nice to look at. The same goes for hair restoration. So what I like to do, and those of you that talk to me know this, is I like to kind of temper down expectations for the sole reason I don't want to disappoint anybody. And I know that using myself as an example, it's a ridiculous example, but we talk about it all the time. My friends were all Italian in New Jersey, and all these guys had what I call polyester heads, where their hair was so thick you couldn't get a comb through it or brush through it. And I was losing my hair at 18 years old. Well, when I got my first hair transplant, guess what I wanted? I wanted an Italian pompadour hairstyle, okay? And I couldn't get that in 100 hair transplants. And my doctor was awesome, and he made it clear to me my hairline was not going to be aggressive, and I was not going to have thick hair. As a matter of fact, I think like the words hair transplant and thick hair are totally like the opposite. We don't even want to bring that into the same sentence to protect the patient. So basically what we're talking about is going to kind of, create a lot of questions. Is like based on your donor hair, based on the amount of loss you have, where you potentially could have, based on your family, are you using preventative treatments, mainly finasteride and minoxidil orally? Do you have thick hair? Do you have coarse hair? Do you have medium hair? Do you have soft hair, fine hair, thin hair? All those different things. You have to kind of bundle all this together. Even dark hair, light skin, light hair, light skin. Does this guy have gray hair, light skin? These are all different factors
Yeah.
that you have to kind of funnel down.
Make up the Venn diagram of what your potential results could be.
Right. And, that's important because it will determine your satisfaction level, and I always talk about that. So for instance, if I'm talking to a young guy, just as an example, 25 years old, pretty young for hair transplants, but it's been on finasteride for 3 years, has really no major balding in the family. It drives him nuts that his hairline has receded a little bit. It might even be considered kind of a maturing hairline, not a receded hairline. No hair loss signs at all on the rest of his head, locked into the medication. And he just wants to have a hairline that he had, let's say, 2-3 years ago. And he's willing to do 2 procedures. That's a classic example of perfection or close to it.
He can get close to perfection.
He can get what he wants. Okay, then flip the switch. Okay, you've got someone who's 32 years old who's very cautious about the finasteride. He's not using it right now. He has thin, fine hair. He's not a candidate for FUE. His father's bald. His grandfather's bald. He's got a lot of balding. He's a Norwood 4 or 5. I am going to make sure on that first call, as hard as it is for me to tell this patient, guess what? You already look 10 years older than what you are, and you know that. That's why you're having this conversation with me. You told me that when we started this call. And you are going to look younger. You are going to look like a better version of yourself, but you are not going to have the thick hair like your friend. You're not going to have that Italian or Mediterranean, Middle Eastern hair or Spanish hair, obviously. So most of the time, because thankful to these types of videos and whatnot, patients already are prepared for that conversation, but some aren't. So, we need to make sure, and I'm talking to the industry because I always remind all the viewers, we want to make this a better industry. This is not just about one doctor, one clinic, or even a few. This is about creating a better industry so these mistakes aren't made. So that's kind of what I wanted to kind of talk to you guys about today, was that sooner or later, it's better be sooner. I'm going to put this together and I'm going to present it to David and get his take on it. But it's going to be a scale that factors in all these different variables and what you could expect. So like a Norwood scale obviously is easy because it's going the opposite direction. You're right now a 2, and hopefully you don't become a 5. How's that possible? Just get on that medication.
Yeah, what becomes tricky is looking at other people's examples. And obviously that's an important thing to do when you're going to surgery. You need to see lots of before and after results, even in person before and after results if you're able to. Get feedback from other potential or other past patients. There's a lot of that research that you can do. But each individual is going to have like individual factors that factored in to what their results were. So if you're looking at any given person, it's really hard to know, especially like necessarily like when they might have gotten on medication, how they responded to the medication, how actually thick they might say, oh, my hair is like kind of fine and thin, but actually it's really not that fine and thin once you see them in person. Like there are a lot of things that are hard to factor in online. And then we see these online like amazing results in 1 or 2 hair transplants, and it's sort of mentally you think, oh yeah, okay, cool, I could have that, I can have that. And it's a lot of the sort of I'm gonna live till I'm 100 mentality. Everyone sort of like feels in their body that they're gonna live to be 100. Like we all do. I mean, like I think to myself, I'm like, yeah, like why would I? I'm like fit. I'll probably live to be 100. But very few people live to be 100. Almost no one lives to be 100,
Right.
So it's like, but everybody's got this, I'm probably the one who's going to live to 100. When it's like, there's a better chance, I don't know all the statistics, but I did look up at one point, like how many people live to 100 is a very small amount of the population. There's a better chance that you're going to die at 70 than you're going to live to 100. So, I think a lot of that feeling, that emotional feeling that we base most of our decision making off of, looks at everyone else's results and thinks, yeah, like why? Of course, I should have that. I deserve that.
Yeah, and part of what we're doing and part of what I'm trying to put together so you have a better idea without maybe calling us or talking to us or whatever, is give you an idea that by today's standard, with the types of medicine that's available, and if you have a plan, if you don't jump into this right away, if you kind of take the path that David was a great researcher when he started. He said he started with really no knowledge, but he knew what questions to ask. Because he's really smart. He was asking great questions, and he checked with a bunch of different clinics. And if you do that, you don't have to be bald. And when I set out, immediately I knew after the first results of my first procedure, I knew that I was not going to have the hair of John Travolta when he was like 18, and I knew I was not going to look like my Italian friends. It was hurtful, but you know what? I quickly recovered, and I'm like, okay, well, guess what? I'll try to hit the next goal, and that is, I don't want to be bald. And I'm not your age, David, but I'm hanging in there, and I'm a gym rat and all that, but I'm happy that I'm not bald, and that's really mission accomplished.
Definitely not. Yeah. I think we've got a few questions here, so. Let's see. Exactly 117 says, "Hey Steve, what do you think about the damage of minoxidil on collagen? Premature aging of skin, fake news, or a bit of truth?"
Well, number one, we're not doctors, and that's just how that works.
We can only give just our unmedical licensed opinions based on our own experience.
The question. I'm going to try to address the question, but again, before I do, I'm going to preface it by saying, listen, man. Let's go back to what I just said. I don't want to be bald. I never wanted to be bald. And I'm willing to try and use my own body as a guinea pig to get the very best results without surgery and doing preventative treatments. Now, what I will say that I know about oral minoxidil is that there are way different doses based on what it's supposed to be used for. So I'm guessing, I have no idea, but I'm guessing that some of these things that are being written about it are based on the dose, which oral minoxidil is FDA approved for, which is hypertension. Okay.
What is typically the dose for
20
hypertension?
to 25 milligrams.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So when you're talking about 5 milligrams,
so 5 times what we're taking.
Yeah.
4
Plus,
to 5 times.
and for women we do 2.5, and sometimes we'll even do 1 and then bring them up to 2.5, and some guys will do 2.5 and we'll go bring them up to 5. So my take on it is I've never had my knowledge is any patient I've ever spoke to or I engage with or I've talked to has never had an issue, And, that's not to say you should jump right into this because I just said that. You should seek the opinion of your physician. So it would be better, or behoove you, I should say, when we have these questions about any side effects of any of these medications, we want to seek out someone we trust in the medical field outside of, obviously someone like me who's just all I care about is not losing my hair. So, and by the way, let me just throw this in and at you, just so you guys know, and when it comes to these medications, my doctor right now wants me on blood pressure medication. I just spent the last year and a half killing it with an organic diet. And I mean, I love pizza. I love bagels. I love dough. I love pasta. It's done. Okay, I lost 20 pounds and I cuff myself every morning. My blood pressure is back to normal without the medication. Second thing is my cholesterol's always been high. It's always been high just genetically the way I'm built and genetically who I am genetically. So my doctor right away wanted to put me on those statin medications. They have horrible side effects and I'm not even taking a risk. So I'm a wimp. If I were a drug addict, I'd be dead. And I'm sitting here putting 5 milligrams of minoxidil in my body because it enhances my hair. My hair means a lot to me. It's kind of sort of been my whole life's kind of passion. So again, not me telling you to try it. What is my opinion about those things? I don't see it from the patients that the doctors that I affiliate myself work with prescribe it. We don't see any of those side effects.
Yeah, it is all a give and take. I mean, there's this, it's tough answering these questions. We can just, because we don't know how you're going to react to anything, with the minoxidil, anecdotally, I feel like applying it topically has more potential. I know that when I used it topically, I felt like it did affect my skin because I would sleep, you put it on and then it would like run down my face, I guess, because I'm not very good at putting it on, or I wasn't careful about it, so it would run down my face, it would get all, and then I would sleep on the pillow, so obviously it would rub off all on the pillow, and then that got all over my face because I'm sleeping on the pillow. So I feel like the effect for me, I felt like I had worse skin during the time that I was using it on my face, which I guess in one sense you think, well, orally it's going more like systemic, so it should sort of make my skin bad all over my body. But I don't feel like that's, at least for me, I haven't noticed any difference in my skin getting worse over the course of the time that I've been on that. But I really kind of did when I was using it topically. But I think there's, when you're putting something all over your face topically every day, twice a day, actually, you're supposed to use it twice a day, and I often would, I feel like maybe there's more potential. Because if you think about it, like even if you're putting water on your face too many times per day, there's potential of like, maybe drying out your skin or messing up your skin. So I don't know. I feel like there might be more potential topically. If I had, given my experience, if I had to guess, I don't know that, but I would go, I felt like I reacted worse to it topically than I, skin-wise, with collagen production than I did orally. All right, cool. Next question is, if someone is taking TRT, do they need to increase the dosage of finasteride? Journey and Destination asked. You know the answer to that?
Yeah, I do know the answer to that.
Cool.
So TRT is awesome if it's managed and if you're getting your blood work done and checking your levels. For all the reasons that I think everybody knows about TRT, energy levels and muscle mass and whatnot, you don't need to take any more than 1 milligram of finasteride. So as long as you're taking 1 milligram of finasteride, it's blocking the conversion through the 5-alpha reductase through, from testosterone to DHT. Now keep in mind that when you're on finasteride, your testosterone is going up as well. Not as much, or it's not even measurable, but it is going up. So, TRT is, I'm a big fan of TRT. I think it's the fountain of youth, in my opinion. But, that's just an absolute reason why patients that are on TRT need to get on finasteride. But the answer to your question is you do not need any more than 1 milligram.
Cool. Thank you for your question. That's a great question. All right. Now, RD2 Fade says, I saw that price does not mean good hair transplant. It's the doctor, not the price. You can get a good hair transplant at $2,500 or bad hair transplant at $10,000. And then second question is, Steve, what is your opinion on beard transplant or beard BHT on a young patient?
Beard transplants from head to face or from
on beard
face
transplant or beard BHT on it? Yeah, okay, so you need to ask, which one. which
I'll-
one
I'll
of
do
those,
both. I'll
or do both of them? Okay, well, first off, can I answer the price aspect, in my opinion, and if you disagree,
Sure.
feel free to pitch in. So I do agree that price does not equal a good hair transplant. I think that, you can get a good one that's expensive or a bad one that's cheap. I think there's a factor of, as you have more money to spend, and as you do spend more money, you have the potential of more excellent surgeons. And I think this is kind of the same thing on like buying. The first thing that comes to my mind is like buying a microphone, because I do a lot of recording, and there's really expensive microphones that cost $10,000, and aren't really that great. And then you have, in my opinion, and then you have $250 microphones that are actually quite excellent. And so it doesn't mean that like what an expensive means good and bad, and cheap means bad. But at the same time, if you have $10,000 to spend on a microphone, you can buy a much better microphone. There's a much wider range of amazing microphones once you start having the money to spend on a much better microphone. So I think that's what it kind of comes down to, is like you can do a ton of research and like work your butt off to try and find someone who's really good, and hope that that's the right fit for you and they're in the right location for you and all those things. But if you spend more money, you're going to really have your pick of like all the top surgeons in the world, and who you really want to go to. What's your take on that?
You're totally on point, David. And now let me throw this out at you. My kind of one of my things I talk about, because I like to say the same things over and over, because listen, this is just one thing. I mean, it's not like 16 different types of products that we talk about, right? It's just hair transplants. So my take on the price is, and this is what I tell guys all the time, is to have a plan, to get on the medication, to talk to your doctor, and to figure out kind of where you want to go and pay a fair price. All right. Now I'm a consumer as well. Okay. Back in the day, when I think this might have been like 1998 or something, and I was told I'd pay $5,000. I was like, $5,000? Like $5,000. But remember, we were doing tiny little procedures for $2,500, and then you just multiply those over 6, 7, 8 procedures. So $5,000 all at once. It's like, oh my God, like $5,000 is a lot of money, But I didn't realize that they were doing mini micrographs and how many grafts, surface area and all that stuff. So back to the point is that, if you do just a little bit of research, you'll see, based on the business models, and this is something that I also like to educate the patients with, is that what's the business model, okay? Not naming any names, don't like to do that. The larger companies, they hire doctors as employees, they pay them per percentage. They need to do 4 or 5 a day in order to make their doctor money. I don't want to share my time with 4 or 5 guys, so let's take that off. Let's say you get an airplane, you fly over to Europe or out of the country, and you're paying, $2,500. Well, that business model is 10 or 12 a day or maybe more. I don't want that, so let's take that off the table. So now when we go back to my same old spiel, right? Board certified, been doing it 5 to 8 years, has a bunch of videos, have really good before and afters, has time to spend with the patient, is educated properly, not put any pressure. You're gonna find that coastal markets, you're gonna see $8 an FUE graft, you're gonna see $6 an FUT graft, or somewhere in that zone. Doctors that have been doing this a long time and they're really, really, really good at it, at that start to not to want to do so much surgery, they're going to do less surgery, they're going to pick and choose their patients, and they're going to raise those prices. So maybe you want to bypass those guys, okay? When you're talking about doctors like, and obviously we just talk about Dr. McGrath, he charges, in my opinion, a fair price. Been doing it 20 years. He's got the work to prove it, David and I, and everybody else. And he charges $6 a graft for FUE, $5 a graft for FUT. That's not a sales pitch for Dr. McGrath. It's only because we talk about him, because, talk about him a lot. And that's just kind of a median price. It's also Austin, Texas. It's not LA. It's not San Francisco. It's not Miami, Florida, which is getting really expensive right now. And it's not Manhattan. So I talk about doctors out in Long Island, Dr. Bloxham, Dr. Feller. I think they might be a little bit higher than that, but they're in Long Island. It's a lot more money to rent space and whatnot. So it's all relative. Yeah. But what you don't want to do is try to convince yourself, okay? Try to convince yourself that, you know what? I'm just not buying this. I just don't think I have to pay that much, and I'm going to find a way to pay less, because it's a supply and demand issue with the quality and the talent of the doctors.
I'm such a frugal person in general, and I'm going to use the microphones thing because it's something I spend, again, a lot of time doing. I record with microphones every day, and there are, if you know anything about microphones or recording equipment, so Neumann is the best, most classic microphone. It's like the Neumann U47, U67, U87. These are like the pinnacle of what microphones basically are, right? And they're the most expensive. They are, or I mean, generally speaking, they're kind of the most expensive. Now, there are so many companies that make clones of Neumann microphones, and that's how they all build them. They say, this is the best clone ever of a vintage U87. So for instance, like a normal U87 costs $3,000. You can buy a clone of a U87 made by Serrano, Stam, Bees Knees, all these different companies from anywhere from about $600 to like $1,200. And I've bought pretty much all of them. Cause I was like, hey, like I don't want to buy a Neumann. Like these are clones, and the company says that they sound exactly the same. And I kind of thought to myself, like, yeah, like Neumann, they just charge too much money. They're like the brand name. They're charging too much. All these other companies, like small little companies, they'll figure out how to make exactly that, and I'll pay like 1/3 the price. So I bought the Bees Knees, I bought the Stam, I bought the I bought the like all of these different clones, the Serrano, the Twin by United. Like I've literally owned like four to 8 clones. And then finally, the Stam was actually by far my favorite in comparison, which was actually the most expensive of the clones, funny enough. But after a while, I did so much testing them out, and I went and rented like the Rio one, and I compared it against all the clones, and then I was like, after I'd spent probably like $5,000 to $8,000 on trying all of these different clones out and buying them, and then going, no, this is. I finally, what did I do? I spent $5,000 on a Neumann. Because I tested it out. I went and rented one, and I was just like, no, this is actually better. Like they've been doing it for Neumann. Like started the they started the classic microphones. They've been doing it for the longest. The German people who work there in the factory have been making those capsules and passing it down for like 60 years. They figured it out. And another thing is the quality control, which is funny because how it relates to hair transplants. What I found was like the quality of all of these different clone companies was like varied a lot. Like you get one and then you test it against the other one, you're like, oh wow, this doesn't sound the same at all. Like the one sounds really good and the other one's like really crappy. But then the Neumann, like I got a couple of them in a row and I was like, these all sound great. Like every one that I rented sounded amazing. And it's like you're paying more money for that. But I finally realized after I was like, man, I've been so frugal, and I should have just gone out for the very beginning and just bought the name brand thing, and I would have been done. I would have never have wasted all of that time.
And that's, David, that's a fantastic example, and I get it because I appreciate like the videoing we do, and I appreciate what you do, and I see your equipment and I love it and this and that. But there's one difference. It's that when you go for these cheap hair transplants, and even if you're doing okay, you're just not like blown away, but you're okay, you're destroying that donor hair. That's what I get nervous about. It's like I'd rather have patients not do it. I tell them that all the time. I'm like, man, if you can pay $2 a graft and come to me and show me your work and show me that 15, 20 times. Okay, maybe I'm a buyer, or maybe I'm buying into this lower cost. But it just doesn't happen. So be very careful. We want in our hearts to think we don't have to spend 15 grand on a 2,500 graft procedure. We can spend 8. That's a lot of money to me, is 8 grand. Right, and it's just time and time again. It's just like, man, and you don't even have the heart to tell the patient, and now you went and wasted all this donor.
And sometimes it's just not. It's just like it's worth it to just go for the thing that is the thing, the one that like, yep, this is great. This guy's great. Like, of course, this is like the reputation's been there for 15, 20, 30 years. They've been doing this, like, just to spend the money and just, I mean. When I look back at my history of doing this, I mean, I think that's just the way to go. And it's like completely against my nature, but the older that I'm getting, the more I get into, trying all these different things. And like even the same thing with like a compressor or a preamp. I tried like every different clone of these, and finally I was just like, no, like the Neve preamp, that was the first thing. It's like, it still sounds the best. It's the most expensive, but like I should have just said away with the others. Everybody else is just trying to be the Neve. Let me just buy the real thing and just be done with it,
Yep.
So, sorry, we gone on a rant there, but let's see the next couple of questions. Well, a lot. So, hey guys, I'm currently on 1 milligram finasteride and 2.5 milligrams of minoxidil. I cut a 10 milligram Lonatan pill into quarters. Would you recommend me upping my minoxidil dose to 5 milligrams? I think if I answer, we're not doctors, so we can't recommend that you change your dosing, but we are both on 5 milligrams per day of oral minoxidil, and most of the people that I'm friends with that are on it are also on 5 milligrams per day. So that's what we're doing. You're welcome to copy us or not. What would you recommend for someone who isn't balding, just a Norwood 1 natural hairline? What do you mean? What would you recommend? I don't understand what you mean as far as what kind of recommendation you want about that. Just curious, head to face. Oh, this is about the beard hair transplant.
Okay.
Head to face. Oh, okay. Beard going head
Yeah.
to face. You've done actually a decent amount of these here,
Yes.
right? Head to face hair transplants.
So a couple things about them is that I'll just go down the list. So not a lot of doctors do it. It's very much an art. It takes a long time. It's about a 12-hour day. All right. Whether it's FUE or FUT, ironically, most guys that don't have any facial hair or very little have phenomenal donor hair. It's the weirdest thing, but it's true. Keep in mind that when you are looking to do this, the hair in the back of your head in the donor zone is not the same as beard hair. So it's not going to be perfect. And of course, nothing's perfect, but we want to be very careful when we do this and we see that the hairs themselves, if it's cut a certain way or at a certain length, will not look exactly the same as, a hair in the beard. So like all of us trying to get hair back on our bald heads, if you don't have any hair on your face, most of the time, patients that I've worked with, when they get hair on their face, they're the happiest patients I've ever seen. They're blown away. They're like, this is better than I thought. This is amazing. And, for whatever reason they want to have hair on their face is fine with me, but they are like a lot of them go from nothing to then they can wear a beard. I mean, one in particular patient was, a super good looking guy. He's like 33, had 2 kids, and he literally looked like he was 19. And he hated it. And he couldn't grow a beard. And when we got done with it, and he had kind of medium hair, it was good hair, but it wasn't thick, ropey, strong hair. And, it wasn't a thick beard, he was blown away.
Wow.
Okay. I've come across one patient that he was Hispanic descent, and, he had a procedure, and he just, he was like, well, it doesn't look like this and it doesn't look like that. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, it's not going to look like an actual beard that you were born with. And no one can tell, just like a hairline, like no one can tell it's been restored, but you have to be very careful what you sign up for.
Yeah.
So going into, and these things are not cheap. Facial hair restoration is about $2 more per graft for each FUE and FUT because there's a lot more labor, excuse me. It takes a lot of time just to numb the face. Lastly, think about the surface area of your face. I mean, think about it. Just measure in centimeters this entire side.
It's a lot.
Measure this entire side. And then you've got, the goatee area and the lip and all that.
It's way more than like the top of the head.
Way more. It's like a big crown, a big bald crown.
Yeah.
So it's at least 2,500 grafts. And then, of course, if you're talking to the right clinic and they're being ethical and honest, they're going to tell you always plan on 2 procedures. Because once you get it, you're probably going to want to make it thicker. But for the right patient, seeing the right doctor, the right clinic, it's amazing. I mean, like I said, I had a patient that was in a gym that I go to, and obviously I wouldn't have my work clothes on, and I kind of keep to myself, and I'm not a young guy in there hanging out with everybody. I talk to no one. And this guy, I saw him in the gym. He had no facial hair whatsoever, and a year and a half later, he had his beard going. And I mean, this guy was like walking around. He was feeling, and then he comes back in, for a follow-up a couple years later. He's like, you guys changed my life. I mean, I'm a different human being. And he was a Middle Eastern descent, and I don't have really that much information on how people's cultures are, but I guess he had a lot of brothers, and they were teasing him. He couldn't grow a beard, and he took it real hurtful. And I'll tell you what, he's like I call him a rooster. These guys in the gym, walking around, he felt like $1 million.
Well, that's great. Beautiful. All right, so next question is Ryan Whitman says, hey David, how many scalp grafts do you estimate left? Also, the result from my procedure with Dr. Convar are awesome. Congrats, Ryan. Super happy I went with a hair transplant. Congratulations, man.
Absolutely.
I'm super happy for you.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I would estimate that I have probably 2,000 safely hair grafts left, FUE. Around 2,000 would be my guess. Now, without like, you know, seeing scarring and stuff like that, or seeing, you know, over harvesting kind of stuff. Can taking Propecia finasteride stop beards from coming in because DHT helps beards to come in, but stops hair loss? Do you know about that?
I do not. I have never heard that. I do not know that. I did not know that DHT helps beard hair, and that is a new fact that I just learned. If that's the case.
Children's Toys and Cartoons for Children says, "Oh Dave, do you have any more new music videos coming out? I love the last one you did for your daughter. Great video, brother." Oh, thank you very much. I think you're talking about the song Dream Girl that I wrote for my daughter. And yeah, I actually just released a music video. My daughter's actually in that as well. A song that I wrote for my dad called A Thank You Letter I Hope You Hear. So that's up on my David DeMuzio channel. It's called A Thank You Letter I Hope You Hear, David DeMuzio. And I hope you'll check it out. It's really, yeah, it was a song I wrote to my dad after he passed away. So yeah, always coming out with new music. I see here. RD2 phase says, if you do not have enough scalp laxity, can you use tissue expander for an FUT hair transplant? I think you generally wouldn't try and do that, right? Unless it was absolutely necessary.
Yeah, unless it was necessary. I don't. If you're asking for the first procedure, that to me, I have not come across anyone who was so tight we couldn't at least do one or maybe even two procedures.
Yeah, that you can't do two is pretty rare even.
Yeah, there are doctors, you know, that will use tissue expanders for the right case. Not so much in the conventional terms of hair restoration. I just don't see it often at all. But it is something that, you know, can be looked at if that's what one of the doctors, someone that is a proven doctor, board certified, that can do that. But I haven't seen a tissue expander since about 2003 for surgery.
Ooh. Sometimes you make me sleepy. Okay, exactly 117, and I think this is gonna be our last question because we're at 32 minutes. We love you guys. We're going over. Exactly 117 says, I'm at month 8 on finasteride. I just start to see a little bit of stability and a little bit of micro new hair growth. Congratulations. Is it true that it might take 2 weeks to reach 2 years to reach the final results of finasteride?
Possible. I mean, we always talk in averages here, and we always don't want to keep guys hanging on forever. So we like to say 1 year. But that's just average. Keep in mind, again, me being the ultimate optimist, closet pessimist, is that you're probably doing a great job of keeping it from any more hair loss. So as far as restoration goes, you guys have heard me say this before. The first goal is to just stay like you are and not lose any more hair. The second goal is to have the thinning hairs, the fine vellus hairs, turn around and become the stronger anagen hairs. That alone will look like some regrowth. And then the final, which would be, of course, the regrowth, which will act more in the mid-scalp and in the crown. Keep in mind that your overall head of hair, including the donor, will improve. It might not be noticeable or measurable, but it will. So everything kind of, is kind of like a means to extreme kind of thing. It's like a lot of times what will happen is if a patient, it's a lot of information, but if a patient kind of loses track or sight and they have hair loss here and they want to grow hair back on their front, and everything else improves, including the front doesn't improve as much as the rest, so it still looks weak. And that's a great candidate for hair transplant. So it'll all improve. You can't pick and choose the hairs that you want to improve and not. But I think I got off on another subject, but the answer is yes, it can take longer than 1 year to see improvement with finasteride.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching. Please click the notification bell so you'll get notified when we go live, because we really try and do this fairly often. I do it on my own, probably close to once per week, at least once every other week or so, depending on what I'm going through. And then, whenever I'm down here with Steve and we're hanging out, we're going to try and do it like twice a day if we can, at least once per day. So click the notification bell to get notified. If you are looking to have a hair transplant, then you should really give Steve a call. I mean, there's no one else better to talk to, in my opinion. So his number is in the video description for pretty much all the videos that we do. His cell phone number, you can text him, send him some photos of your head and your hair, and he'll get back to you and hopefully hook you up and give you the hair of your dreams, or at least close to it. So we will talk to you soon.